The Toronto Blue Jays have called up right-handed pitcher Yariel Rodriguez to bolster the team's pitching staff. And let's put it this way, has been lackluster to start off the season. So we'll break that down on this episode of Jays Digest, as well as a couple of injury updates on Erik Swanson and Jordan Romano. They could be back sooner rather than later, so we'll have that and much more coming up next. What's up, Jays fans? I'm your host, Peter Vryonis, alongside host Nick Gosse. We had some breaking news late last night. Yariel Rodriguez, the Cuban right-handed pitcher, has been called up by the Toronto Blue Jays. Man who signed the 5-year, $40-something million contract in the offseason, got paid big bucks to be a starting pitcher down the line. That opportunity may come a little bit sooner than we may have thought because Bowden Francis hasn't exactly settled into that fifth starter spot. The bullpen hasn't been too great, at least in terms of long relief. Wes Parsons was designated for assignment. He was then shipped off somewhere, and Mitch White, not so good. We gave Mitch White the benefit of the doubt coming into the season because he was throwing 98 miles an hour and he looked good, but he's still Mitch White at the end of the day. So the Blue Jays are looking at some other options, some internal options, and Yariel Rodriguez is a name that came up for them. And in tune, they called him up to the big league squad. He is expected to be on the roster for tonight's game against the Colorado Rockies. Nick, I don't know if he's going to get into any game action because he did just pitch recently with the Buffalo Bisons, but this is a big move for the Blue Jays, and he looked really good in his short stint in AAA, and hopefully this translates to the big leagues, and who knows, he might surprise us and be a starter full-time.
Yeah, we thought that he was going to be coming up a bit later, but you kind of mentioned the pitching staff was very bad so far, specifically the bullpen. Obviously, some starters have been great. Before we get into it, a quick reminder, hit the subscribe button. We're on the road to 13,000. But let's get into the first topic. And you said they make an interesting move here by getting Rodriguez up this early. Obviously, we're only a couple weeks into the season, and a lot of Jays fans were a little bit surprised by it. And you see here, they're calling up Cuban right-hander Yariel Rodriguez. Should be activated this Saturday, so it's either going to happen today or tomorrow. And there's a lot of moves right now, a lot of moving pieces for the Toronto Blue Jays, and they might do it before the roster is finalized tonight, in which case obviously, there'll be more corresponding moves, which we'll cover in a future video. But Peter, he looked very good in AAA. And of course, Thomas Hall says, I guess this means Yariel Rodriguez is A-OK despite leaving his last start early. And then the reinforcements, Peter, coming in are going to be big this weekend. We're probably going to have Danny Jansen returning. I mean, we'll get into Erik Swanson and Jordan Romano update a bit later. But the team is going to look a little bit different. Now the question is, obviously, what happens with the roster right now, given Yariel Rodriguez coming up onto the team? Some moves are going to have to be made, whether that's in the form of Mitch White, whether that's in the form of Bowden Francis. I don't know. Maybe they give Bowden Francis his last start a chance to kind of get one last chance for him to get a good start in, but I don't know. There's a lot of moves. Because it's happening at a very interesting time, there's probably going to be 5 or 6 moves now that are going to be corresponding, given, of course, Jansen, Romano, Swanson, and all these people.
Well, maybe the Blue Jays saw enough out of Yariel Rodriguez to put him into that fifth starter spot because his stuff looked good and he might have been a bit further along than we may have thought. We know that he didn't pitch last year, and he was primarily a reliever in Japan before the World Baseball Classic with the Cuban national team last season. So the Jays had to build him up. They had to ramp up his innings count, and they've done that. He hasn't gone more than 5 innings, if I'm not mistaken, in any of his AAA outings, but still he's looked pretty good, and he's gotten better and better with each appearance that he's had there. So I think the Blue Jays are going to give him a shot in the fifth starter spot, and now it's all about valuing Mitch White against Bowden Francis, who's better in the role that they're going to be occupying. And we saw how good Bowden Francis was last year in a sort of mop-up, long relief type of role. He was amazing in that role. He hasn't quite settled into the fifth starter spot like the Blue Jays would have hoped for, and I think that's why they rushed this move a little bit. I don't believe Yariel Rodriguez is coming up here to be a reliever, a 1-inning or 2 or 3-inning reliever. I think he's coming up here to be a starter because the Jays have seen enough with this stuff. They think it'll play at the big league level, and I suspect that to be true. So only 6 and a third innings of work so far for him.
10 Ks.
Nothing crazy. Yeah, the stuff is there. There's no doubt about it. But can he start games for you, and can he give you a big time boost in that rotation? That's going to be a question mark here going forward for the Blue Jays. But I think Bowden Francis in the role that Mitch White is occupying right now is a lot better than him at that role, and I expect some movement on the Mitch White front soon. When Yariel Rodriguez is ready to go here, I expect a move to be made because Mitch White just isn't cutting it. I know his numbers don't look too bad on the surface, but you had to see a bit of progression here in the early part of the season, and you haven't seen it with Mitch White.
And obviously, Mitch White, no options. He would have to be DFA'd. And I think a likely possibility here is that, you kind of said it, they start Yariel Rodriguez and build him up in real game action and have Bowden Francis piggyback off of Yariel Rodriguez going forward until Yariel has the ability to go deeper into games, because we've seen Bowden be good in the piggybacking role last season. So maybe they just, I guess, DFA Mitch White and throw Bowden back in the bullpen and then throw Yariel Rodriguez in the starting rotation and have Bowden Francis come up there. But let us know what your thoughts are on that. Do you have any quick final ones? I think that might be the most likely outcome, is that they both occupy that fifth starter spot to a degree. Obviously, Yariel starting maybe, or maybe the other way around, who knows, until Yariel is fully built up to 80-85 pitches.
This is going to be a big test for him in this series. I think if you're ever going to get him in and try things out, it's against a team that is 3-10 and a team that struggles like the Colorado Rockies do. They're not a good pitching ball club. They're not a good hitting ball club either. So I think this is the time to try things out. If you're the Blue Jays, try to finalize those last few roster spots, because there are some question marks surrounding the team, and you got to figure this out heading into a tough stretch against the Yankees, the Royals, who are playing some really good baseball, then the Dodgers at home. So it's going to be tough. It's going to be a tough stretch of games for the Blue Jays. They can't escape this early season gauntlet, but they're going to have to figure out their roster, and they're going to have to figure out who works where best. And I think Yariel Rodriguez is going to get a real shot here in this series.
Yeah, and speaking of the gauntlet, we're going to have some help as Jordan Romano and Erik Swanson's return is imminent, Peter, and this is good. Obviously, we kind of knew this, but John Morosi dropped a bit of a bomb today saying that the team is optimistic that Swanson and Romano will join the active roster within the next several days. I would suspect maybe even a bit earlier, maybe by Sunday. I don't know. If they're ready, they're ready. We saw Danny Jansen. He's also ready, so he's probably going to be coming back. I don't know if he's going to be activated tonight. There hasn't really been an update on that front. Probably by the time this video is up and first pitch is closer, we'll have some more updates on that. But Jansen's coming back. Swanson's coming back. Romano's coming back. The team is going to look very, very good, and they haven't even looked too bad already. Obviously, the offense has been pretty bad, but Peter, great news. Obviously, Jordan Romano, elite closer. Erik Swanson, elite setup guy. Like, these are two critical pieces, and we may have lost last game because of the lack of bullpen that we had, given all the work we've put on to Chad Green. So having this is going to be very big. And Danny Jansen, I think, really is the biggest return out of all these guys. But I don't know, very, very good news, and at a pretty good time, as they need to sweep the Rockies, to be quite honest.
Yeah, they do. There's no excuses this time. Seattle is a pretty good team. I know they haven't started out the year too great, but still, taking 2 out of 3 against a team that has given you this much trouble in the past few years, it's not the worst possible outcome. But you are 6-7, you are under 500, and you're last place in the AL East in the early portion of the season. So these are the kinds of games that gets you back to a respectable record. You could finish this series 9-7. I'll take that if I'm a Blue Jay fan all day, every day. And I think Jordan Romano and Erik Swanson, those are the two biggest acquisitions that this team could make at this point right now. Having those guys come back and give that bullpen a bit of a breather, because they've been worked. They've been worked here. And you got to give Jimmy Garcia so much credit for how he's performed early on in this season. His stuff, he was touching 100 miles an hour last time out against Seattle. Obviously, you can't leave him in there for a third inning of work, but he looked really good in that outing, and he's been really good all season long. His stuff looks dominant, and I trust him a lot more than I would in like a seventh role, in the seventh inning role, than I would in a ninth inning role or an eighth inning role, and that's what's been going on with him this year. So I think the Blue Jays are going to get a big boost from those two guys, and Danny Jansen as well, because catching every day is already starting to catch up to Alejandro Kirk, and we're in game 13 of the season, game 14 tonight. So you got to get him a breather, and you got to get his bat right, because he's also a very crucial part of this team.
Yeah, very long season. Everything is given what the roster looked like and all the injuries. I think the Jays are in an okay spot, but they definitely, I mean, anything but a sweep would be a little bit disappointing. Obviously, just win the series is usually what Charlie Montoyo used to say, but at this point against the Colorado Rockies, got to make sure to get it done. But that'll wrap it up. If you want to check out our video from yesterday, click on your screen now, and hopefully the Jays can take care of business tonight against the Colorado Rockies at home. See you tomorrow.